Hello and welcome to From Zero to Global, a founder's journey in building a successful cybersecurity SaaS company with Ian Yap.
Hello, everybody. I appreciate we have the afternoon lull, so if you start to fall asleep, just wave your arms and I'll talk really loudly. I am Ian Yap. I am the founder and CEO of Avertro. If you think you're going to learn about what we do in this talk, I'm not talking about what we do. You can go Google it. So when Orsted asked me to do this, they figured it would be a nice change of pace from all the cyber stuff that's happening next door and over there. So if you want to be super technical, this ain't the session for you. It's more just to give you an insight about what it really is like to start a company from Australia, a tech company specifically, and the good parts of it, and the not so good parts about it, and some of the more difficult bits, because I can tell you one thing, Australia is really good at starting professional services companies, but Australia is really shit at supporting and helping technology companies. I can see a few other founders in the room here as well, so they'll probably empathize as well. So the whole global part that's just me in a few countries around the place, because one thing that we have to do is we have to travel a lot to do various things, especially if you want to go global. So that's obvious. That's San Francisco, but then that's, I think, Brooklyn, New York, that's Denver, that's US military air base in Tampa somewhere, because we did a Tampa kind of accelerator. So the military was involved, and there was a lot of on-base things that we can't really talk about, but it was really cool being in the US air base somewhere in Tampa. That's one of the US Army's biggest air bases, and all their F-14s and F-18s and F-15s all fly into there. So we sat there and watched a whole bunch of planes take off and didn't do any work for about an hour, so that's nice. You do get to do some really cool things through this, but with all that positivity, you have to deal with some really, really crap stuff as well. I am a builder by trade. That literally is I've since thrown these away, but these are my university textbooks. So I can program. I was a programmer from back then. How do you know this is me? Because that photo at the top there, that is me from when I was 10 years old. So that really is my shelf. These are the books I used to learn to program. I spent a bunch of years coding and building. So I think building has always been in my DNA. And some of you probably have read these books enough to know they're super boring, but they're necessary to understand the fundamentals. And these things have served me well through the years, because if you want to build a tech company, it helps when you can hold your own in the room with all the engineers and draw architectural diagrams, especially in today's world where half the code you write, you probably, when AI writes it, and like if you've tried all the AI stuff, you can't read all of it. You have to just understand architecturally how to design stuff. I did graduate from UNSW. This is not my graduation. This is actually, for the Americans amongst you, I was giving the commencement speech, or the Aussies call it the occasional address at UNSW. So this is for the graduating class of 2024, where I had to go in there and talk about all the things I'd done since I graduated, and it was in front of all these students who graduated in 2024. So a bunch of those people sitting behind me are actually some of my professors. So they've been there since I graduated. So it was an interesting moment for me to be able to go back there and talk about all the things that they would look forward to, and I also had to think about if, as they skyrocketed into the careers ahead of them. So when I graduated, I'm just going to give you some backstory, because I didn't come out of university and start a company. I joined IBM as a graduate. So I was there for 6 years, and in a place like IBM, they move the graduates around and let you try different things. So if some of you have been graduates at big companies, you try different things. So probably half of you in this room, I accidentally ended up in cybersecurity, and I've been stuck here ever since, and probably will be stuck here for quite a while. Now, one of the coolest things that I ever did at IBM was, have any of you heard of IBM Red Books? One person, 2 people. So I don't know if they still do them, because I'm not really followed IBM of late, but I did spend, one of the most memorable things I did at IBM was I sat in Austin, Texas for 6 weeks, so I got to know Texas barbecue pretty well. That was my office in the Austin IBM office. That's the apartment block I stayed in. That's the car I got to drive around with. I got to drive around in. And those are the good-looking roosters I got to write the book with, who are exactly like they look, and that's all I'll say. Having said that, it meant I got my hands really, really into identity and access management, and that's where I got my training in security, and I implemented a bunch of identity and access management type things for banks, for governments, most of which I can't talk about. And you learn a lot along the way in IBM. I subsequently left IBM and I went to live in the UK for a little bit. I worked for a DLP vendor, and then I worked for an identity vendor again in product management. So the reason I bring up the UK is because I think I've always been a builder, but when you're in Australia, our culture doesn't really encourage you to be a startup founder. In fact, it is the exact opposite. They encourage you to go and get a job, like a place like IBM or Microsoft or Palo Alto Networks or whatever, and do the career thing, which is fine. I'm not saying that's wrong. That's what most of us do. That's what I did. But I think the whole builder mentality in me was always there under the covers, and that's what has driven me to this point in time, to do what I do. Now, in the UK, I think I caught the startup bug a little bit. So I moved to the UK in 2007, 2008. And that ecosystem for starting the company is very different to Australia. And let's not even talk about Silicon Valley, right? You hear the story about Silicon Valley. But I think that drove me, especially given the upheaval in the markets that was happening then, to go, you know what? I'm going to give this a go because the ecosystem here is good for that and is really useful for giving somebody the launchpad to do a startup or to be entrepreneurial or to build. Ultimately, it was trying to build. And I'm sure all of you have a build gene in you somewhere. It's really what you want to do about it. You can build your own company. You can build a product in the companies you work with. But I think building is a way you feed the soul for your creativity. And technology is creative. You might not be a musician or an artist, but it is an inherently creative thing to build in technology, which is what drives a lot of us to keep doing our jobs. Now, for various reasons, life-related, I moved back to Australia, I think, in 2010. And this literally is my desk that I sat at for 2 years, building. And given my background was identity and access management, there was a lot of identity software for infrastructural type things, for reverse proxies, for provisioning, all the stuff you probably still have to deal with today. Identity will never die, by the sounds of it. Having said that, the gap I did see at the time was it was way too hard to layer identity and access management into the way you build things, into code. So I figured there was a place to build software to do it. So I spent a year or two literally just building. Because at the time, very naively, I thought, if I build it, they will come. And that is a mistake many, 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 many entrepreneurial-minded people make. And we all make it. So what I did build ended up being, it worked. It did what it had to do. But about a year into that, a company was founded in Israel/US. And that company basically did what I did. Not that I really competed with them, because that would probably be delusional on my part. But what I did build was pretty much the same thing that company ended up exiting to Okta for $8 billion. That company was Auth0. So the first lesson I think I got from all that is that every single person has ideas. Ideas are easy. They're a dime a dozen. And even if they're $8 billion ideas, your ability to execute on that idea is 99% of the work. Your idea, even if it's the right one, is only 1% of it. So it is significantly harder to execute on what's in your brain than it is to come up with it. Because all of you are really intelligent people. You work day in, out in cybersecurity, and you know what all the problems are. Especially you've been here for 5 to 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is. You know what the problems are. So you all definitely have ideas about how something you do in a day-to-day job can be better. Can you execute on it? And that is extremely difficult. So on the back of that failure, I did mention that societally, culturally, outside of Silicon Valley and some of the more entrepreneurial-minded parts of the world, people kind of frown upon entrepreneurism. So I had a lot of pressure in my immediate circle, I won't name any names, about, Ian, when are you going to get a real job? What the hell are you doing? Like at some point, you're going to make some money. Why did you spend 2 years doing this and you seem to be getting nowhere? And at some point, I think I had to suck up my ego and go, you know what? I'm getting nowhere. I got to stop kidding myself. I've got to go get a real job. So I did. And this is me actually at Allcert in 2012 at the old location, not this one. So I didn't actually join NetIQ when I first decided to go get a real job. I actually joined IBM again for 6 months. Long enough to realize I did not want to go back to IBM. Because being a builder and being driven the way I'm driven, and I'm sure a lot of you are, you always want to be growing, you always want to be getting better. And the job that I went back to IBM was actually back in the security consulting team. And I found myself doing stuff I really knew how to do really, really well, which was great if you like that. But as a builder and someone who likes to create things, I didn't feel like I was doing anything creative or impactful. So I thought, you know what's the best thing I can do for myself to grow? I'm going to go do something else that is completely outside my comfort zone. So I joined NetIQ as the APAC product and business manager, which meant I had to go and stand at conferences, I had to do talks, I had to evangelize. I did do a lot of sales presentations, but I wasn't the presenter that I needed to be to do this job or even my current job. And the way I looked at it was, well, let me go and shake myself up. Let's go do something that is interesting, but I don't know how to do half this job. But my job is to go and convince the people who would hire me that I can do that job, right? And it was one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in terms of growth. So I did that job for about 2.5 years. And every job I got after that was pretty much in corporate, but it built upon the baselines of everything I learned before. I joined CA after this to lead their Northern Region business in Australia. I joined, I think, EY after that to run their business in New South Wales. And then I joined McAfee. So I think the second lesson, which Silicon Valley celebrates, but the rest of the world doesn't, especially not in the ecosystem that we live in. Nobody wants to fail. But it's a badge of honor in Silicon Valley when you fail because you learn a lot in failing. And I learned a heap of a lot in failing when I couldn't build Auth0 all by myself. Now, failure is okay if you have the resilience to get back up and keep going. Because if you can't, then that's when you're proving everybody right who said, you shouldn't have tried that, or why'd you try that at all? Why didn't you just stick with a real job? You've heard this before. It's not about falling down. It's about, can you get back up? And when you get back up, what do you do about it? And boy, did I do something with it. So I did say eventually I ended up McAfee. I was the APAC CTO for McAfee for a little while. And I did a bunch of stuff for them, which I won't get into details for. But it also meant, like, if I thought getting out of my comfort zone with NetIQ and speaking at lots of things and talking at lots of things was difficult, try being on CNBC and Bloomberg. That's me at Bloomberg. I don't know how many remember in 2017 when WannaCry, not Petya, hit. So I ended up being the one that had to go on Bloomberg to represent McAfee globally, to talk about what McAfee was doing for not Petya and WannaCry for McAfee's customers. Like globally. Because that Bloomberg and that CNBC one, but the Bloomberg one specifically, was beamed all over the world for people to go, what the hell is this not Petya WannaCry thing? And if you fail on this stage, it is there forever, and it's there for the whole world to see that you screwed it up. So that is absolutely it wasn't in my comfort zone. And this was within 2 weeks of joining McAfee. I left EY, went to McAfee, WannaCry hit, and they went, you're going on Bloomberg tomorrow. In fact, because I think WannaCry or NotPetya happened over the weekend. So on the weekend, I was on the phone already with Global and my bosses and the CEO, and they were like, what are we doing about this? We've got to tell our customers, we've got to tell them how to respond, we've got to tell them what we're doing. What are we doing about it? So I was on calls all that weekend, and then on Monday I got to the office, and they said, you're going to the Bloomberg studios at Circular Quay. and you're going to talk about it. You just have to be ready and to embrace the challenge to do it. But the main lesson I think I took from that is, it's one thing to fail and it's one thing to get up. But you have to give whatever it is you're doing right now, everything you've got. Because whatever your destination is, you are currently training for that destination, which you may or may not know yet. Because that is the only way you put yourself in a discomfort zone to go on Bloomberg to talk to the whole world about what a global cybersecurity provider is doing about a global cybersecurity incident. And if you owe it to yourself to give everything you're doing right now, everything. So this is me in 2019 at Sydney Town Hall in front of 1,000 people in the audience, packed house, and thousands more online because they streamed it to whoever wanted to watch online. So I think they ended up having 5,000 online, so 6,000 people. And then it's still on YouTube. It's not easy to find, but it's still on YouTube. Actually, my Bloomberg and CNBC, and those are also on YouTube. So if you're bored one evening, you can try and find it and see how I did. But this is also still on YouTube, and this was the launch of Avertro, basically, to the world. They gave me 3 minutes to get up there and talk about this. We had no customers at this point. We had not really a product. We had an idea and a slide deck. Antler, for those of you who don't know, is a global VC incubator, headquartered out of Singapore. They were the first investor in Avertro. So the first check we ever got was from Antler. Antler, without sound like an ad for Antler, incubates companies, and then when they think you're good enough, they'll give you some, like you go to an investment committee. Every VC has an investment committee. You go to an investment committee, and then they decide if you pass or fail. If you pass, they give you some money. So Antler has a bunch of unicorns in their stable. We're not a unicorn yet. But if you know Eralo, which is the eSIM company, Eralo is an Antler company. Lovable, if you vibe coded, you probably use a Lovable. Lovable is an Antler company, and they have a whole bunch more. So Antler at this point probably lost count of how many companies they've invested in, but they're a big global VC. I think they're the world's biggest pre-seed investor in the and they basically only started before we started. Anyway, what I did say at that thing was, and it was very, very choreographed, but I did say, I remember the quote very vividly. Like, I felt like my whole career was one long training course leading me to this point in time on the 5th of September in 2019, well, somewhere around there, to start and launch Avertro. Because, and this is not my quote, I think it's a Roman philosopher called Seneca, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. You need some luck to happen to you, but you need to manufacture some of that as well, because when it happens, you better be ready to receive it, which is why you owe it to yourself, no matter what you're doing, to give it everything, because you never know when you're going to get lucky. And we all get lucky at points in time. It's whether you're ready or not to embrace it and to receive it. If I hadn't given everything I did beforehand, before Antler, everything I got, Antler does not give us that check. There's no way I can pitch. If you think about what it takes to do what I do, what it takes to present to a bunch of VCs who don't know what you're talking about, and to deliver a message, and to lead a company, and to inspire a bunch of people, it takes training, unless you're naturally like a comedian, which most of us are not. It takes a lot of training to do it. It takes being media trained and practiced. Having gone in Bloomberg and CNBC, not that I'm saying that's what you need to do, just for me, that's what I needed to force myself to do, to be able to stand at Sydney Town Hall in front of 1,000 people and thousands more online and deliver word perfect 3 minutes of why Avertro mattered for more investors to give us money. And since then, we'd raised from other VCs a couple of $1 million, and we have a bunch of customers as well. So I don't ever discount anything that I did in my corporate life leading up to starting the company in 2019, because that is as important as everything else I've done ever since. So everything you are doing right now is super important for whatever it is you're going to be doing in a year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. That literally is the registration certificate for Avertro. And it's still sitting somewhere on my desk. So that was the very first thing I still remember very vividly. You remember things in your life. like very impactful things. I do remember sitting in the Sydney Startup Hub at a specific meeting room with one of Atlas CFO and my co-founder CTO at the time, Roman, just typing into the portal all our details, Avertro Pty Ltd, and the ASICs thingy, and then at the end they ask for your credit card, you put the credit card in, you press submit, and then your ACN comes up and you go, congratulations, you're incorporated. You'll get all your documents in a week, 2 weeks, whatever it is. This is literally the paper form. It's a photo of the paper form for Avertro's incorporation. And, oops, hang on, let me go backwards, too many. And this is from 2019. So Roman was my founding CTO at the time. He's since gracefully retired onto a beach in Portugal because I'll tell you the Roman story. So Antler basically matchmakes you with your co-founder because their belief is that it takes a subject matter expert and a builder to form a successful company. Somebody needs to build it, somebody needs to sell it, and at least one of you needs to know what you're actually doing. I was the business dude and the subject matter expert for security, and Roman was the guy who could build it. So Roman built the first version of our product, but that was before the crypto crash, so he had a lot of crypto thingies. At the time it was COVID. By the way, if you remember, in 2020, that was the height of COVID, so that was really fun. We almost died like 5 times in 2020, which is a different story. But you get a lot of adversity, but there's no adversity that you face than your frickin' CTO deciding he wants to retire to a beach in Lisbon, Portugal, because he made way too much money in crypto. But that's what happened to us. And I think this was in 2021, early 2021, he said, I'm going to move back to Europe because I hate all the lockdowns that Sydney and Melbourne are putting on us. Like, I can't be caged like a bird. I need to. And he's from Europe. And at the time, I said, OK, fine, we'll have to try and make the time zones work. But in hindsight, I think that was him trying to get to the point where he could just retire nicely into the beach in Portugal. We still talk, by the way, so there was no animosity. At the time, I was not very happy with him. I was super pissed. And then the first thing I did was I called our investor and I said, hey, this just happened. Like, what do I do? What the hell do I do? And I said, don't worry, I've lost like 5 CTOs in my time. You'll get through it. And luckily, we had a very, very good engineering team under him to pick it up and keep going. We're still thriving today. And Roman still owns some shares, but less than he would have if he still hung around. That was the first second really huge piece of adversity we faced. The first one was COVID, because COVID times, if you remember, nothing was happening, no money was being spent. Like, I don't know how many companies died through 2020, just simply because they just ran out of money. And we almost did, like multiple times. It was actually my ability to raise money in 2020 that kept us going. And we closed a few customers. That literally is the first desk that we had in the Sydney Startup Hub. That beer is from later on. We couldn't afford beer in the first year, but there's beer in there now. That's not our desk anymore. We've since moved to nicer places. But very humble beginnings. This is the first physical card that talked about what we did. We kind of still do these things, but it's obviously expanded. And that is the very first letter of intent we ever got from a customer. So that's from CPA Australia. What I will say is, at a conference like this, I know we don't necessarily like doing it, but the people you meet at these things and you meet at work are much more important than you realize. And I know it's uncomfortable. So one tip I'll give you is if you see me wandering around out there and you want to speak to someone, just come up to me later on and say, tell me what you liked or didn't like about this, and that's your icebreaker. The reason I bring that up is because CPA, so back to AusCert 2012. CPA Australia at the time, the head of security is a guy called Nigel Hedges, who some of you may know. Nigel is still one of our customers. He's not at CPA Australia anymore. Back in 2012, Nigel and I worked together at NetIQ. Nigel, I was the APAC business product manager. Nigel was the sales engineering manager for NetIQ. So Nigel and I got to know each other really well in our jobs. Not thinking that we would ever, it was just a good relationship that we formed. The one thing I will give you a tip on is, and a lot of entrepreneurs ask me this, how do you get your first customers? You get your first customers by asking them to help you. So what we did before we even built the product, we actually had a bunch of design partners. I just emailed I called a bunch of security leaders that I knew. I said, look, we're starting a company, we're trying to solve this problem. I just need to know what part of this problem you care most about, what you don't care about, and how you currently do it, and how you would like to do it. There's no obligation whatsoever. And if you see some value in it, you can help us. If you don't, you still help me by giving me feedback. So we spoke to, I think, probably 20 different cyber leaders. Now, I would not have been able to do that if I'd not been in security for 15, 20 years by that point in time. Now, Nigel, at the time, literally had this problem to solve. And he went, you know what? It's not because I know you or like you. I actually have to solve this problem. And I will be your first customer if you deliver on the things you say you're going to deliver on. And I will sign a letter of intent to be customer number one when you launch a product. We launched a product in January, I think mid-January 2020. CPA signed the contract on the 31st of January 2020. That product is obviously nothing like it is today. We are 100 times better product than it was back then. Price point's very different now, obviously. Point being, the really hard things you do are the things that get you through every little bit of adversity that you have. That whiteboard actually happens to be when we sat down in 2020 and did a review of 2019 about what we did well, what we didn't do so well, what we're missing. Some of those things still exist. I read it the other day and going, yeah, we still have some of these problems. But from humble beginnings, a lot can happen. But the main point is, and people always ask me, like, when did you feel ready to start a company? And I give the same advice no matter whether it's starting a company, getting married, or having kids. It's the same piece of advice. If you wait to be ready, you never will be. You get ready by doing it. Never at any point did I feel ready to start a company. I just did it. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. And I saw a way to get to the next level and next version of myself. So that's actually what blocks most people. Like, you can fail. It's actually the fear of failure that stops most people. So you're probably in here, and one of the questions on your mind if you're in this room is like, what about raising money? Like, how do I raise money? Well, you raise money by doing a lot of these things. That's literally me pitching to a room full of investors. That's me talking to Travis, who's one of our angel investors. He wasn't an investor at the point in time. That was literally the first time I met Travis. I didn't take this picture. The event photographer did, and I found it later. Oh, it's Travis. And then that's me at a different event. That's somewhere in San Francisco. I've lost count of how many of these I did. But I've done this for a little while. A lot of people who want to start companies, who just started companies, come to me and go, hey, like, what do you think about raising money? And I always say, like, okay, what's your plan? Like, you don't have a product yet. What's your plan? And 9 times out of 10, they come to me and go, well, I'm gonna do a pitch deck, because this is what Silicon Valley tells me to do. We are not Silicon Valley. You want to do Silicon Valley? Move to Silicon Valley. I'll do a pitch deck. I've been in this industry for a little while. I'll do a pitch deck. I'll meet every VC in the market. I'm going to go raise $10 million, and then we'll get our first few customers. And I go to them, that's not happening. You won't even raise $1 million, let alone 10. Why? Because if getting investment is your primary goal of doing this, you won't survive. And that's what most people get wrong. If you get the solution that people want to buy, everything else follows, not the other way around. And most people sit there going, I need to raise money, I also can't do anything. No, you will not raise money if you don't solve any actual problems, which is why people always say, problem first. Now, one of the good parts about this, and if you want to ask me about VC stuff, ask me later. I'm not going to drone on about VC stuff. You get to meet a lot of cool people along the way. Some of you might recognize some of these folks. Ivano is right there. So I've known Ivano for a little while. Ivano is one of my favorite people in Australia or in the world. So I put it out there. That was, I think, we're at CyberCon. It was before he joined Alcert, I think. And then that's at San Francisco, where I'm talking to a bunch of CISOs before we go on some walk along the coast. That's me with a bunch of founders. Vaughn's actually out there with Sidearm, so if you want to go and support an Aussie startup, go talk to Vaughan at Sidearm. Vaughan's out there. And then Paul McCarty, who you might have seen at OSCED a few times, and a few others. That's Mikko Hyppinen, who most of you should know. That's Casey Ellis, who's the co-founder of BugCrowd. That's Dave Jerry, who's the current CEO of BugCrowd. That's Nigel Hedges, and that's Jamie Norton. So I've known these two for a little while, obviously. I've talked about Nigel. Jamie and I have known each other from way back before he became the CISO of the ATO, and he's currently the CISO of ASIC. My point is, like, you do get to meet a lot of cool people. And whether they're your customers or not, or their partners, it doesn't really matter. And sometimes you get to sit on Zoom calls with the ex-Prime Minister of Australia. So it is really hard, but you do meet a lot of cool people. But you also meet a lot of not so cool people. Because lots of people want to give you advice because they go, well, I can help you, but you got to pay me X. So as a founder, you want to take every piece of advice you can. You don't want to alienate anybody. You say yes to everything. One of the lessons is not on here. You need to learn when to say no. But early on, you say yes to everything. But one of the most important things is, unless a person's ever been in your shoes and done what you have to do or what you want to do not listen to them, because they're a dime a dozen. Along the way, you evolve. Like this, that was our very first banner from Antler Demo Day. That's a slightly more advanced one. I think that's our current one. So your messages change along the way. That's actually our booth, I think, at OSCED here 3 years ago with OzCyber. OzCyber obviously was very supportive of the ecosystem, so we had a little booth that they gave us. And that's from CyberCon last year. So obviously, we've evolved a little bit, but the point I'm trying to make is, and then your merch gets cooler on the way as well. Like, so now we have like Jenga blocks with our logo on it. We've got like risk heat maps and dragons and things. And then we also have a lot of customer testimonials, which are very nice. But a mistake we often make is we think everybody cares about what we have to say or what we're doing. One of the hardest lessons I've ever learned is nobody gives a shit about what I'm saying. But as a founder, your job is to convince people that what you say matters. Now, team. So this is the Avertro team, some of which are still here. That's my leadership team. That's the greater team. We started with 2 people, and in 2020, I think we only have 4 or 5 people, and today we've got close to 30. What I will say is, at every stage of your journey as you're growing a company, your culture has to change, and that's out of necessity. So there are some people, like early on it's very chaotic, and necessarily speaking, it is chaotic. So you need a lot of adaptable people who are jacks of all trades, who can do lots of stuff and can pick up a lot of stuff. Now, some people will be very, very good at one thing and can be quite useful at other things. Some people are just going to be very, very generalist kind of people and not necessarily good at one thing. That's okay in the early days. One of the hardest lessons I've had to learn is that as much as you like somebody, along each evolution, you have to make very hard decisions sometimes. And it's not a personal thing. You've got to figure out the right shape of culture and the right shape of the people in your organization as you grow. So like I recently had to let somebody who's been with us from early on go because he just didn't fit the shape of what we are now. At the same time, a lot of our current people would have hated what we were like 2 years ago. We would have not survived. And the main message here is it's critical to find people who can roll up their sleeves and get things done at that point in time, because ultimately a startup has no space for people to manage, to talk, to wave their arms around. Like, you've got to do stuff. So from that first stage where I was probably still very, very green, very, very naive in the product, so this is me last year, where we now have access to our office with that kind of view, a lot has changed. This is to the point where we can have a booth at RSA. This is RSA just this year in San Francisco. And then we get invited to Austrade's things. That's the Cyber UK thing that was recent. We're also in Gartner's reports now, which was the furthest thing from my mind when I first started the company. Like, imagine getting in a Gartner report. Look, I know some of you love Gartner, some of you hate Gartner. Whether you like Gartner or not, getting into a Gartner report is a significant achievement from a little startup that started with just 2 people in Sydney. And then next week, we're going to be at Cybersecurity Europe, which is Europe's largest conference. But the main message and lesson 10, the last lesson in all this is, you have to understand along the way that, and this is actually even in your careers, what got you here won't get you there. So even as a person who has a career, a lot of people get to like a management position or middle management and they feel like they get stuck. And interestingly, the studies that study why people get stuck in certain places, same for companies, is because the behaviors that got them to the point actually become detrimental to getting you to the next point. So you actually have to unlearn some of the things you learned to get you there so that you can go to the next thing. So for each of you, that is a career challenge. For a startup founder, that is my challenge. I cannot run Avertro the way I ran it 2 years ago if I want to get to the next stage. I'll skip the last slide because I think I'm almost out of time. So this is me at Black Hat last year. Anyway, shortly after this photo, I take selfies a lot, as you can see. I went to meet 2 people, and they were from a big vendor. And I knew these people before. Like, they were very, very high-level executives in a large vendor you would have all heard of. And I sat down. They had their drinks already. I sat down, and I expect them to say, oh, what do you want to drink? But they didn't do that. They said, let's get right down to business. I said, hang on a minute. Like, what's happening? And they said, how much do you want for Avertro? I said, what? I said, look, we're not at the point where we want to sell. The point I'm trying to make, okay, if I'd said yes, I would be I would be very rich. But I said no. So the main point of being a founder is what it takes to be a successful one, to grow from 0 to global. You have to be single-mindedly obsessive about solving an actual problem that you care about, because that's the only way you can get through all the really difficult stuff that's going to hit you every other month. Thank you very much. We have 2 minutes for questions? Okay,
Yeah.
Questions?
Yeah, the app isn't working, so if you have questions, please pop your hand up and I will run to you.
Oh.
Of the 10 lessons, which one is the most important?
Which one is the most important? I never actually thought about that. I think it's being able to do things. Because if I wasn't able to roll my sleeves up, there is no way I can expect anyone that is in the team to roll their sleeves up. And if you can't roll your sleeves up, nothing gets done. And like, you can forget about getting into Gartner reports and doing conferences. So roll your sleeves up, get shit done.
You talked about being single-minded and going for what you want. How do you balance that between family and work, and also balance that if you want a side business rather than quit job and go and do startup?
You can't.
What about the family one?
I think as long as your family is understanding enough to know that, like, you can't ignore your family, obviously. I'm not saying you do that. However, it takes a certain level of understanding in your family to give you the room to do what you need to do, which is the problem I had in 2012. Like, it wasn't actually exactly my immediate family, but a lot of the pressures I had in 2012 when people said, Ian, go get a real job, they were coming from friends and family. So if you get that peer pressure all the time, it is super hard. And it does obviously affect family life, and it still does today. There is a balance. What you have to get right is what kind of balance it looks like, but it does take some sacrifices to get there.
Awesome. Last question. We'll be a little bit cheeky and go over.
I'm guessing I know how you feel about the proposed changes to the capital gains tax. Would you have started your company in Australia, or if you were to start again, where would you go? And I guess, do you think it disincentivizes like tech companies in
Okay,
Australia?
so there's 2 trains of thought on the CGT thing. For those who aren't aware, like, the latest budget basically doubles my tax if and when I sell Avertro. That's the problem. However, if I manage to sell Avertro for lots of money, I mean, half of a lot of money is still a lot of money. So I think as long as we do the things we need to do, I'll still be fine. The government, Albo just is my co-founder. You've all seen the memes, right? Albo is your co-founder. So Albo is my co-founder. It does disincentivize some people from working for startups, because even the people who have stock options in our company will also get taxed half that to CGT. So you've got to account for that to a point. Your second question, I think that comes down to your situation. If you are tethered to Australia and you can't go anywhere else and you really want to start a company, you've got to start it in Australia. If you're a free bird and you do anything you want with no commitments, my honest answer. Okay, the caveat here is it's very hard to get money from anyone if you've never done this before, even American investors, Asian investors, or European investors. So for me personally, if and when we're successful and exit, I would have done this before. So it's significantly easier for me to go and raise another round from a US investor or an Asian investor. So I think if for second-time founders, you probably wouldn't do it in Australia. For first-time founders, my advice is you do it where you have to do it, or where you can do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Very inspirational.